Good morning, Monaton. Good morning. Yes, you guys can hear me, right? Great. So, for those who might not know who this bearded person standing before you is, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Riga. I am the husband to one wife, the lovely, beautiful, and anointed Miss Saiton Riga, who is to my right and to your left. Babe, we practiced this. This is the part where you stand and you wave. I'm the father to one son. You heard him earlier. His name is Benaiah. Give it up for Benaiah, who's in the service. Yeah, we also practice that if nobody else responds, he will respond to me. So, yeah, this is important. So, what do? I do many things. I am a creative entrepreneur. I'm a recording performing artist. I'm a music producer. I'm a global citizen, world traveler, CRE, GHC, ETC, all of those titles. But more importantly, why it is I am here today is because I serve as a worship pastor in the Mavuno movement of churches domiciled here at Mavuno Downtown. This is my home, and it is my honor, my pleasure, my privilege to be able to give God's word to you today because it's about something that is so dear to my heart, worship. Watu wa upstairs, tuko? Yeah, nimeambiwa mmelipwa, so respond hata nyinyi pia. So, allow me to recognize, to appreciate, and to honor our lead pastors of the downtown campus. Give it up for Pastor Kevin and Faith Kilonzi. Now, as is customary, when you see me here, it's because they are not here. They're back in the country, back from their mission, but just as it was my birthday yesterday, it was their anniversary yesterday. Yeah, it is one of the blessings of the Mavuno movement that from all the way down from our senior pastors, we have good marriages in this church family. So, if anybody has their contact, please reach out to them, just tell them, happy anniversary, we celebrate you guys. Now, allow me to welcome us to the third installment of our September series called... Yeah, I feel you. Wired for this. How worship can change your reality. For first-timers this month, we've been exploring what worship is, why it's so central to our relationship with God, and how it can change the world around us and transform our lives. We've been looking at the life of one of the most prolific singer, songwriter, worshipers in the Bible, King David, and reflecting on many of the songs that he wrote that are encapsulated in the book of Psalms. In our first week, we learned that we were created to worship. Whether we worship God or not, we're worshiping someone or something. And we worship God because we learned this: what you choose to magnify will eventually control you. This was week 1. Week 2, last week, we learned that the worship is a powerful tool that David used to defeat dark spiritual forces. And we said that your worship is your weapon. Today we want to consider another aspect of worship as we reflect on the life of David. Are you guys ready? Okay, the guys in the front row are nodding. Let's try that again. Are you guys ready? There are places in this beautiful Kenya of ours like Paradise Lost, for example, where you can take a guided tour into a dark cave and experience a new degree of pitch black darkness that you don't experience anywhere else. Completely scary. Sometimes life feels like that, and you're facing such challenges that you can't see the way ahead. And maybe some of us here are there right now. Allow me to paint a couple of scenarios for you. You're crushed in spirit, defeated, overwhelmed by the circumstances of life. For example, you're looking to relocate to a new country and every visa application is rejected. Or you've been working hard to build a business, but the environment has been punishing you that you're watching it fail before your very eyes. Maybe you've made some investments that have not worked, and now you're facing debt and distress in the face. Or maybe it's your relationships, a broken engagement, a failing marriage. Or maybe you've struggled under the burden of infertility and multiple miscarriages. Maybe you're watching family relationships become strained before your very eyes, and with every passing day, it weighs heavily on you. Maybe it's your mental or your physical health that you seem to not have a handle on, and it's getting you in a dark place. Whatever it is, I suspect that many of us here are familiar with a deep, dark cave in your life. And whether you are or not, I want to assure you that this message is for you. So what do you do when you find yourself in a dark cave, so to speak? Here's a powerful truth about worship. Worship defines your reality. Turn with me to Psalm 57, verse 1 to 4. This is David writing. Have mercy on me, my God. Have mercy on me, for in you I take refuge. I will take refuge in the shadow of your wings until the disaster has passed. Verse 2. I cry out to God Most High, to God who vindicates me. Verse 3. He sends from heaven and saves me, rebuking those who hotly pursue me. God sends forth his love and his faithfulness. I am in the midst of lions. I am forced to dwell among ravenous beasts, men whose teeth are spears and arrows, whose tongues are as sharp swords. We'll be reading the rest of this psalm, but I need to give you the context within which this psalm was written. He actually wrote this when he was in a dark cave. Let me explain. You see, we learned that David, at around the age of 15 to 17, was anointed by prophet Samuel to replace the disobedient King Saul. Now, he was anointed to be the next king because Saul had strayed from the Lord. Now, unbeknownst to Saul's aides and all of the people working for him, when Saul was oppressed by evil spirits that manifested as depression and heavy-heartedness, and they prescribed worship to him through somebody who they said would be a good and skilled worshiper who would come and play the harp, and then the demons would be chased away. So the person they found was this same David, who was anointed to be Saul's replacement. Now, shortly after that, David fought and defeated Goliath, a 9-foot-tall Philistine giant, and as a result, he became the king's son-in-law and also the most famous military commander in Saul's army. But very quickly, things changed when the king became jealous of David. It all began when women began to compose songs about David. Songs can be problematic. So the women began singing, Saul has killed his thousands, David his tens of thousands. Saul has killed his thousands, David his tens of thousands, which really isn't accurate because all he had killed was Goliath at that point. But these songs are kind of like, let me see if there's a modern day. It's like if we had the president and people in his presence started composing songs about his deputy president right before him. I don't know if it's too soon or too familiar for Kenyans, but hey, so it's like the president has his tens of projects. The deputy president has his tens of thousands of projects. So obviously there's this tension that's brewing. And Saul was angry, and in 1 Samuel 18:29 it says, Saul became even more afraid of him, and he remained David's enemy for the rest of his life. Okay, from here everything rapidly goes downhill. So Saul attempts to impale David with a spear. Maybe again, I need to bring it into context. It's like you have tension with your boss. And then as you go to meet with your boss, you already have tension. So as you're explaining yourself and what you're doing and how you're doing good work and trying to defend yourself, he reaches down and he pulls out a revolver and he puts it on the table. So then as you keep talking, you see him kind of check that it's loaded and cock the gun and everything. And in the middle of you talking, he actually takes full aim at you with the heart to take you out. I don't know, is there somebody here who has that kind of a boss that we need to pray for you? Or should I be asking, is there somebody here who is that kind of a boss so that we can pray for you? So David, interestingly, as he's going through this, I don't know if it's youthful naivety or he was just like childish optimism. this happens and he still goes back to work. So it happens not just once, but a second time. King Saul tries to take out David and assassinate him. David finally gets the hint and he fled for his life. Now, he gets to the tabernacle. This is where the Ark of the Covenant is kept and the priests of the Lord who watch over the Ark of the Covenant. Now, they help David because they know him as Saul's greatest military commander. But then King Saul does something that's very bad when he finds out that the priests help David and his men. He goes to where the tabernacle is, he goes to the priests, and he kills all of them because of how much he hated David. Now, David was so desperate that he ran to the land of his enemies, a Philistine town called Gath. Are we still together? I'm getting to the cave, but I'm painting you the picture of how we got to the cave, okay? So he goes to a place called Gath. Now, it's important to note, Gath in Philistia, Goliath was known as Goliath of Gath. So he goes to the hometown of the giant that he kills, in the hope that these guys have probably heard that I'm enemies with King Saul right now. So maybe they can accept me onto their team. Unfortunately, they didn't buy it. David was easily recognized and captured. They knew he was as good as dead. He knew he was as good as dead. So when they brought him before the king, he did something drastic. Check this out in 1 Samuel 21:13. So he pretended to be insane in their presence. And while he was in their hands, he acted like a madman, making marks on the doors of the gate and letting saliva run down his beard. So either David's performance was very Oscar-worthy, or he was so desperate that the people of Philistia really, really believed him and let him go on his way as a madman. They dismissed him, and in his great relief, he went to the town of Adullam and found a series of caves to hide in. Are we together, guys? So now we're at the caves. This is how he's gotten here. By all accounts, David was down in the dumps at his lowest, lost in a dark cave. Now, here's the thing. Whenever we're lost in a dark cave, there are a variety of responses we're likely to have. First one that comes to mind is we withdraw or retreat into a shell. We're overcome by anxiety, depression, and it's not long before we're engulfed with a cloud of misery and despair and unhappiness. It can manifest in these ways. We stop coming to church. We stop going where people are. We stop attending morning prayers. We stop serving. We stop attending DG. Maybe we even take a break from God. We withdraw. Another way some of us respond when we're in a deep darkness is we get angry. You start asking God questions of, why am I going through this? My life was fine before all of these problems. Now, another way is, if you're like me, you choose to soldier on. You bite your lip, you clench your fist, and you keep powering through. But as you do, you know your faith is severely compromised. You might still come to church, you might still serve, you might still attend morning prayers, you might still do all of the things, but you're spiritually numb. Very low expectations of God or of your faith. In the lonely caves of our lives, I put it to you that these are reasonable responses. And who would begrudge David if in the dark cave of his life he chose one of those responses? Yet he goes a completely different direction. From the heart of that deep, dark moment, David chooses to write one of the most beautiful psalms unto the Lord. Psalm 57. And as we read earlier, he begins where most of us would, by pleading for God's mercy and vindication. I'll have you guys read verse 1. Read it aloud. 1, 2, 3, go. Have mercy. Like he has no friends because everybody is trying to kill him, both at home and abroad. And then let's go to verse 4. And I'm going to have you guys read it again. 1, 2, 3, go. I am in the midst. You know, I suspect that most of us, if we prayed when we were in deep and utter darkness, that's the kind of prayer that we'd pray. But then David prays something different in the next verse that makes all the difference. And allow me to read it to you. Verse 5. Be exalted, O God, above the heavens. Let your glory be over all the earth. Pull up Rewind Selector. Consider with me, this guy's in the cave, right? Cave. Guys, are we together? Cave. No electricity. No Wi-Fi. No microwave. No running water. No Naivas around the corner. No family. No friends. Cave. His face is on every wanted poster from Gaza to Damascus. The only thing he has are fears of threats and impending death. But then he goes on to declare how unshakable he is, how steadfast his heart is. Listen to verses 6 to 11. They spread a net for my feet, and I was bowed down in distress. They dug a pit in my path, but they have fallen into it themselves. Verse 7, my heart, O God, is steadfast. My heart is steadfast. I will sing and make music. Awake, my soul. Awake, harp and lyre. You can see him speaking to himself. I will awaken the dawn. I will praise you, Lord, among the nations. I will sing of you among the peoples. For great is your love, reaching to the heavens. Your faithfulness reaches to the skies. I don't know how many of you have heard worship songs that have that phrase. Your love reaches to the heavens and your faithfulness reaches to the skies. The context of that is a cave. Be exalted, O God, above the heavens. Let your glory be over all the earth. If there was ever a mic drop moment, ladies and gentlemen, this is it. Instead of ending his prayer as a cry for help, David does something extraordinary. Even through his situation, even though it hasn't changed, he declares prophetically that God has already delivered him from his enemies. He commands his spirit to ignore his circumstances and instead focus on praising God. He speaks over his very soul, commanding it, awake, arise, sing and praise God. Instead of focusing on his problems, David chooses to focus on the greatness and faithfulness of God. You know, if you think about it, David at this point is experiencing zero evidence of God's goodness in his life. Alone in a cave in a faraway land, facing near certain death. There was no reason for him to sing of God's faithfulness. But then again, on the other hand, he did have reason to sing of God's faithfulness. You see, as a young boy, God had delivered David from the bear's claws and the lion's jaws. He had floored the unbeatable Colossus Goliath. And he had been saved from not one, but 2 assassination attempts. You see, God had done things in the past. And the thing that I've learned is that when trouble comes my way, it has a unique way of obscuring what God did in the past. Because all I'm focusing on is my problem that's right in front of me. Picture this. I actually don't have to picture it because it actually happened to me. You live in an apartment. And then in that apartment that you live in, it has a very nice and good view. But a private developer, right next to your good view, watu wa pipeline, hallelujah, begins to build a building that compromises or takes away that view completely. A natural fear is that when that person is done, you won't be able to see anything. It's the same scenario with your trouble. You're in financial distress, and you begin to worry about defaulting on your next rent or mortgage payment. That's first floor that has been built. KRA are soon going to start coming knocking on your door. That's second floor that's been built. You don't have enough money for rent, school fees, or other living expenses. Third floor. And the more you keep your eyes on that trouble, the more the floors increase to the point where you will have no clear view of anything else other than your problems. In the cave of his life, David knew that if he kept his gaze focused on the obvious challenges before him, his life would be consumed. So in the face of incredible odds against him, he chooses instead to worship God. You know, worship has a powerful way of restoring our perspective. At the place of worship, trouble isn't eliminated or doesn't magically disappear. You know, King Saul didn't magically stop pursuing David. But the worship from the cave did something for David. Worship restored his perspective of who God is and what God is able to do. Worship in the cave armed him with the strength and the courage to pursue his purpose. I'm going to say many things in this sermon. This is the one thing that I need you to hold on to. Worship awakens your faith. Somebody turn to your neighbor and say, neighbor, worship awakens your faith. Now I'm going to need you to say it with your chest. Neighbor, worship awakens your faith. You see, David may not have realized it at the time, but there was so much at stake for him in that cave. If David had lost hope there, he would never have known what God has in store for him. David eventually would become the greatest king that Israel has ever known. He would establish a nation in peace and prosperity. He would conquer kingdoms. He would become the benchmark by which all other kings in Israel would be judged. However, if David gave up in that cave, his destiny would easily have been aborted. A lot was at stake. But there was more. David wasn't just fighting for himself, he was also fighting for all the future generations that would come after him. If David had given up in that cave, the destinies of future generations would have been at risk. Because of David, his son, his successor, King Solomon, never has to lift a finger in battle because he experienced peace and prosperity on every side. Imagine this, ladies and gentlemen. Imagine that because you stood tall and strong in the Lord in your cave, that your children and your children's children never have to fight any of these battles that you are experiencing today. In fact, David's legacy was so strong that when the genealogy of Jesus was written, Jesus was referred to as a son of David. Now, last week, you guys were so gracious to me, the substitute teacher. You allowed me to tell some personal stories, unburden, and have a therapy session in front of you guys. I don't know if you'd extend the same grace to me this week. Is it okay if I tell a personal story again? Okay, there were like two guys who are like, yeah. Other guys are like, I'm not sure. Kind of went south. Story? All right. So let's rewind the clock to about 2010 all the way to 2012. It was a bit of an extended period. I have just graduated from University Nairobi with my law degree. And I do the most obvious thing that you should do when you have a law degree. I went and pursued a career in hip-hop and rap music. Turn your attention to the screen for Exhibit A. So yeah, this was me in about 2010, 2011. And let me just be honest with you, ladies and gentlemen. There are levels to the term struggling artist. There are many levels, but let me just say, upcoming rapper is at the bottom of the barrel. In terms of earning capacity and financial freedom, you are very far from it at that point. So, yeah, I don't know why it felt like I had this irresistible urge to do this or subject myself to that, but I felt like, no, I don't know if it was youthful naivety or childish foolishness. I was like, this is the call of God over my life. This is what I need to do. Well, let's see how that played out. I was called to that on the screen. So this is from my music video for a song called Sina Chorus. Thank you. I love you guys too. Now, at the time, I was working on an album of about like 14 to 16 songs. There were some interludes, that's why. Anyway, so 14 to 16 songs. The album was called Urban Prayers. Yes, shameless plug. You can find it on Spotify and wherever it is you listen to music. It's there. Now, Urban Prayers was my collection of my personal conversations with God written out in song. And because my state was very much at the bottom of the barrel or the food chain, a recurring theme in the album was being broke. So I just need you guys to understand context. So let's just go back to Sina Chorus. All right, yeah. So me again. Yeah. Big, with a huge smile on his face and nothing in his pocket. My gosh. So, in fact, one thing I remember about this video is a sidebar. So this Sina Chorus is a song about me trusting God for provision. So I remember the guy who I ended up meeting who became the video director and producer, he actually did me a solid. I was sponsored to do this thing. But anyway, so I'm in his office. We're talking about the song. We're talking about the concept of the song. And we're like, okay. So he tells me, now because of what the song is saying and what you're trying to convey, we really need to make sure that you look like you're struggling. And then he proceeds to say, so on the shoot day, can you come wearing what you're wearing today? Somebody turn to your neighbor and say trauma. Somebody turn to your other neighbor and tell them emotional damage. True story. So guys, in that video, I'm not wearing a costume. Those were like my clothes. And then the funny part is, I actually thought that I had dressed well for that meeting. In my head, I'm like, this is me faking it till I make it. But clearly, I wasn't fooling anybody. I digress. So the songs on that album, including this one, have an almost Davidic flavor to them in that they begin with me ranting and raving about like where I'm at, and then towards the end of the song they end up switching. God kind of teaches me something about himself as I engage in the conversation. I don't think there's any other way for me to. It's been about 10 years, but can I rap portions of the song for you guys? Okay, I'm going to kick it old school, so completely a cappella. So that you guys can hear the lyrics. Now, two things I must say. One, for the non-Swahili speakers, Sina Chorus is mostly in Swahili, Sheng slang. So if you need a translation, please see me and I will send you the PDF with the translation. There actually is one. And then second thing I need to say is this song is about 10 plus years old. So some of the slang might not have aged as well. But bear with me. All right? So verse 1 starts like this. Niwie radhi, nina maswali mengi, nimekosa mwelekeo natafuta papas, kupata wera tafash. Nasaka wax ndo nipate kwangu angalau. Cheki marafiki vile wameendelea, vipi mienendo yao umependelea, ukanisahau for real, kuuliza si ujinga, sio madharau. Pata shahada, lipwa mshahara, mgwanja, isikuwe lengo langu kuu, na kusikiza nisivunjike guu. Nimekosa bus fare, inabidi kaguu. Ni nini nitadu? Ni nini nitafanya? Nikishinda rat race, bado mimi ni panya. So, I'm in this place of frustration where questions are not being answered. I don't have provision. I don't know how I'm going through life. I'm even more frustrated because as I'm ranting and raving, writing the song is flowing. But there's this one part of the song that I can't write. I don't even have, of all of the things that I don't have, God, I don't even have lyrics for the chorus. Sina chorus, lakini mi si mind. Sina do, lakini mi si worry. Sina ndai, lakini nitawai. And as I begin to engage with God in this conversation, something shifts in verse 3. Nimekufuata miaka kadhaa na sijapata chapaa nyingi, lakini umenisort mahitaji malap kadhaa bila ya kulipa shilingi. Nashindwa pesa zilitoka wapi? Bila kusanya mimi siyo crookman. Umeprovide so unastahili shukran. Nikicheki future ninababaika. Nasawaje pali tumetoka pali tumefika. Nikiwari ni lini nitamari, ni lini nitasave enough ni buy gari. Nilenge cladism tush exhibition. Niko worth more kuliko douche mission ndio nafaa kuzingatia. Siwezi outshine maua hata jays nikizingaria. Sina million lakini nitaangukia. Follow the leader, Mola wewe tangulia. And that was Sina chorus. I got one more. So, same album, same season, different song, 20 shillings in my pocket. Need to get to the studio because I have a gracious producer who's like, we have a standing studio time weekly session, so come through. And I'm like, God, I don't even know what I'm going to sing. I don't even know how I'm going to get there. I don't even know what I can sing. And God reminded me of a psalm that's actually not in the book of Psalms. It's in the book of Habakkuk by the prophet Habakkuk, chapter 3. Check this out. Though the fig tree does not bud, and there are no grapes on the vines, though the olive crop fails, and the fields produce no food, though there are no sheep in the pen, and no cattle in the stalls. Response? Yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will be joyful in God, my Savior. So I'll just skip ahead to the final verse of this song. It says, no bud on the fig, no sheep in the pen. My happy song, it doesn't depend on the state of the crop or the fruit in the field. Your true joy is beyond what I feel. I'm keeping it real, no, not in denial, and I'm learning the praise in the midst of the trial. You're the judge, you like me to testify. So I silence the foe, avenger. And I'm not talking Marvel, so you know. Whatever I go through, I know you won't let me go forever. I've got something to praise about, so I'm gonna raise a shout of joy until the walls fall down. You know, the interesting thing about hindsight is that all of the questions that I was asking in that season of life, God has answered all of them. All of them. Yesterday was my birthday and somebody was reminding me some of the things that some of the things that I'm living now were prayer requests back then. But because I have new problems today, I forget that some of the things I'm enjoying now were actual prayer requests. They were for real prayer requests. Ladies and gentlemen, let's not let our circumstance obscure us from the greatness and the goodness of our God. You know, in the caves of our lives when hope is lost and dreams are dashed, caves are places where destinies can be aborted and futures ultimately destroyed. There's some of us here today who feel like we're in a cave and the dark, difficult season of our life is unending. And in that cave, if we are not careful, if we're not careful on how we respond, we may never grab hold of the things that God has for us. 1 Corinthians 2:9 says this: what no eye has seen, what no ear has heard, what no human mind has conceived, the things God has prepared for those who love Him. But you must not allow yourself to give up in the cave. Tell your neighbor, don't give up in the cave. Again, say it with authority. Neighbor, don't give up in the cave. Listen, your future is at stake in the cave. You have no idea what the Lord has for you in the coming seasons of your life. Don't die in the cave. Listen, your children's children will benefit based on how you fight through that cave. But somebody here has to tell their soul today to awaken. Awaken. This is what we do every Sunday. When we come and we have that moment of praise and worship at the beginning of the service, it's a life or death situation. When you set aside time for yourself for personal worship, this is what we are doing. Just like everybody else, we may be overwhelmed with life's challenges, but unlike everybody else, we have a weapon of warfare that is called worship. Like David, you can turn to worship and say to your soul, awake, arise, get up, make music to the Lord, get up, worship the Lord. There's too much at stake for you to give up and die in that cave. You cannot afford to lose perspective in the cave. Remember, worship awakens your faith. Turn to your neighbor and say, neighbor, worship awakens your faith. Neighbor, worship awakens your faith.